Hey, what's up and how's it going? My name is Toby, and in today's video we're going to do a deep dive and a scene setup tutorial for the AR Magic Bar, which is a Unity asset that I've created and which just received a very big update. So we are going to first of all discover all the new features of the AR Magic Bar, and then we are going to find out how to get our 3D prefabs, 3D objects into our AR scene, how to activate the inventory and how to enable the player to organize the assets within the inventory, to select and place them, and also to transform and manipulate them. And a bit later on, we're going to find out all about custom interactions, which is a brand new feature that basically will allow you to create any kind of interactions that you wish for. So in our example, we are going to turn our cube from the standard material to a green material up on a click, but it could be also used to pick up objects or to talk to some kind of character. So it's a super flexible, super powerful system, and we are also going to just discover all the great new things that the AR Magic Bar brings. And we're going to start right from the beginning, so setting up a new project, and of course there are timestamps below, so if you're already familiar with setting up an AR Foundation project, then you can pretty much skip the first two sections. Alright, but that's it, so let's jump in. So let's begin by creating a new Unity project, clicking on New Project, and then let's choose the Universal 3D, so the URP rendering pipeline. I'm using here the 2022 LTS version, and I'd also recommend definitely 2022 or Unity 6, but Unity 2021 LTS works too generally. And then let's call this project, for example, AR Magic Bar, let's say test, and then let's choose a location, and then finally click on create project. So when the editor has started, let's set up our project. Let's click on file, build settings, and then let's first of all change the platform to either Android or iOS. So then next up, let's close this for now and let's go to Window, Package Manager. Let's choose the packages in the Unity registry and let's install AR Foundation. So click on install. Let's click on yes here and restart the editor. Alright, so once the editor has restarted, let's go back to edit and then project settings. And then in our XR plugin management, let's enable ARKit on iOS. On Android, of course, the AR Core, and on PC, we'll take the XR simulation. Cool. So then let's finally go to project validation and go to iOS, click on fix all, and of course on Android, the same. So next up, let's close this window and let's set up our scene. For that, let's delete the main camera and let's also delete the global volume for now. And then we're gonna go right click XR origin, make sure that here the position is at 000, and also let's take an AR session here. Cool. So then let's click on the XR origin and let's add a AR plane manager, as well as a raycast manager. So then next up, let's create an XR plane. So right click XR and then the default plane like this. Let's drag it into our assets and then simply delete it here. In the XR origin, let's drag in the AR default plane as a plane prefab, and the rest can stay like this. So next up, let's go into our settings, and then we want to go to our URP, I think it's the balanced renderer. So we're probably going to go through all of these and add the renderer feature, AR background renderer. And this is because otherwise we're just going to see a black background if we're going to start the scene or the game like this. And now finally, let's go to Window, XR, AR Foundation, XR environment, and let's import or install our sample environments. So then click on import. And now we have a new environment that we can use for testing, and we can of course change it here as well. So let's check out if things are working by clicking on play. Alright, so planes are appearing here and we can see that they are pink, and this is because we are in URP. We can convert the material of the plane to URP, but generally things are working. So let's quickly fix the last things here. So let's double click on the default plane, and then we can see under materials the debug plane material. So this one opens up in the project view, and then simply go to edit, rendering materials, convert selected materials to URP. And now it's not pink anymore. And then finally, let's also make the directional light a bit less intense. It was quite bright. Super, so let's close all of that. And now it's time to import the AR Magic Bar. And I'm going to do this through the assets menu here, but you guys are gonna do this through the window package manager, and then through the My Assets, and then using the AR Magic Bar tab here. But since the version 1.0 has not been released as I'm recording this video, I'm going to do it through the custom package. So then let's simply hit import. And once we're done, we should see in a window here a new submenu of the AR Magic Bar. So let's open up the prefab and image editor and put this one here into our view. So then we'll also have this new folder here for the AR Magic Bar, and when we open this one up, we can see that we have this prefab which we're gonna drag into the scene, and this is where all the Magic Bar logic happens. So if we open the inspector window, we can see that we have a few settings here. We don't need this one right now. But we, for example, can choose in between mesh detection and plane detection. And as we're using plane detection here, let's just switch the setting. But if you would be using AR Foundation's mesh detection or Lightship, let's say, then we could also use mesh detection. And of course, the AR Magic Bar is also compatible with just standard 3D scenes. So let's say you had a project where some scenes would be in AR and some scenes would be in 3D. You could, for example, use mesh detection to also have the full functionality of the AR Magic Bar within just a standard 3D scene. So then we have a setting to deactivate spawning. And this is a global setting, so we can later on also deactivate spawning for single objects. But let's say we want to create a game where all you do is cast spells, and you click on an icon here and then click on the screen and it will cast spells. Well, then we would deactivate spawning globally. The same thing here you can do with the selection, transformation, and interaction. So let's say we had a game or some kind of experience where we want the player to just be able to play something but not interact with it at all. Then we could toggle this globally. There are a lot more settings on the individual objects where we could also just say, okay, this specific object will not be interactable, or this specific object can only be moved but not rotated. And this is something we can set up later on, but this would be an easy way to do it globally. So then here in the placement bar UI elements, we do have a UI item prefab, and the UI item, if we double click this one, we'll still need to import the Text Mesh Pro Essentials. So let's do that. And if we double click this one and go to Scene View and then go to 2D and select the object, click Shift F. This is basically the the UI object that you will be seeing here on the bottom, and we could potentially customize it. We could change the color, or if we don't want the edges to be rounded, we could do that. We could actually transform this into a whole different object, and so customize it as we wish. But for now, we're just going to leave it like this. Then we do have a icon for the height texture, pagination, and the inventory. So these these objects we can also change out if we want to change the height, paginate, or inventory icons. Simply drag in something else here. So then we can decide if we want to auto deselect an object on placement. So for example, if we click on an object on the bottom bar here and then place it in the scene, do we want the player to just continue placing by clicking? So click, click, click and place all the objects. Or do we want to auto deselect it so that the player has to select the object again well, in order to place it again. This is just a choice that we can take if we want it or not. By default, it's deactivated, so you can simply click all the time and place objects. So then we can determine if there should be a hide icon. So should we be able to hide the objects or the placement bar at the bottom, or should we disable this feature? Next, we can well, set the manage object type, and so here we can choose between the inventory or just a paginate option. So do we want a way to click at the placement bar on the inventory object and see all of our objects appearing, or do we want just a way to paginate through all of these objects? And this is also just a design choice. And we can even disable the inventory or paginate option altogether. So this could be useful at runtime, for example. So to trigger this, but maybe there will be some kind of game or experience where you will only have 3 objects or 4 objects in total. And so we can just disable the inventory system here altogether. And then we can choose the amount of items that we want to have on each page. And this is, so the page here means this bottom bar page where we can click and place on an object. So how many objects do we want on each page? So these are all the most important settings for the AR Magic Bar. But now we have already set up the plane detection. We want to set the inventory, and the rest we're gonna leave at default. So next up, let's get some objects into our scene. So let's close our folders here. And let's create a new database. And for that, let's right click on the assets, create folder. And we want to call this folder, for example, my AR Magic Bar databases. It's a very good practice to have your assets or your databases not necessarily inside the AR Magic Bar folder, and this is because maybe there will be an update soon, and then you can just safely store your objects here, and if you update the AR Magic Bar, you'll have them separate, so none of those objects get somehow lost or messed up with another update. So then let's do another right click and let's create objects for our first database, and we could call this cube objects. And within this cube objects, we can create another folder, call this one the prefabs. So this is just going to be the objects with the corresponding icons. Then let's say we make another folder with the database and objects like this, and we could create another folder for later on with the custom interactions like this. Alright, so then within the database objects, let's go ahead and create a new AR Magic Bar placeable object database, and this is the cube database. So here we're going to store all of our cube objects, so let's also call this cube database, like this. Alright, so then in the prefab and image editor, let's drag in our cube database. We can hit refresh, and now we can here add pairs of prefabs and icons, which will then appear in our AR Magic Bar. So we, first of all, for that need some kind of objects. And we could also just import any kind of assets that we have, any kind of 3D objects that we have created ourselves. But for this tutorial, to keep it easy, we're going to be using primitives. So for example, take a 3D object here and create a cube like this. And let's make sure that this cube has a parent. So let's also create the cube parent, and let's make sure that this is at 0, 0, 0 and scale is 1, 1, 1. This will make things a lot easier. And let's drag the cube into the cube parent, and let's move the position up by, let's say, 0.5. And so one experience I made is that within AR, well, the objects need to be scaled down. So let's rather take the cube and make this scale to 0.2 and the position to 0.1, so that it's laying exactly on the 0 point here, so that it won't look so gigantic in our AR scene. And we also have this cube parent here, and this is pretty cool because well, this one's still at scale 1, and it will make it a lot easier and smoother to then rescale the object within the AR scene. So it won't just jump and become a lot bigger if you just touch it. So it will be a lot smoother. Awesome. So the cube parent, or let's rather call this maybe cube object. Let's just prefab this one into our prefabs folder here, and let's delete it from our scene. Also, before we delete it, make sure that if you import some kind of assets that they do have a collider attached. This is very important because the collider is being used to later on, well, select the object. It can be a trigger collider. However, there needs to be some kind of collider either attached to the object itself or to, well, the child objects of your 3D prefab as well. This is fine too. All right, so then let's delete the cube object. Let's double click it, and let's also make a nice screenshot here. Let's hide the grid, and let's just do a screenshot that is 1 by 1. So I think about this is fine. And then let's drag in the screenshot into our prefabs folder here, click on it, and let's select the texture type to sprite, 2D and UI, and let's click apply. So then let's also call this one cube icon, like this. Awesome. So then let's go back and open up prefab and image editor. Let's add a pair, and let's add the cube object here and then the cube icon. And let's simply hit create placeable objects. So now we can see we have 2 new objects here in our database objects folder, and this is because the prefabs are being transformed to the placeable objects, and they are being placed in exactly the same folder as the database. So we can now go ahead and click on our database, and we'll see that the cube has been added, so the newly created placeable object. And if we double click on the cube, we're going to see that, well, a lot of functionality and things have been added, namely all that the AR Magic Bar does. And now we could potentially go ahead and further manipulate or change this cube. So we could just change the size, or we could even, well, for this cube here, change the whole objects. We could make this a cylinder or a cone if we wanted to later on. So there are still a lot of options to change things. What is very important though is that here this parent object basically has an placement object visual attached, so that the AR Magic Bar knows what is the actual 3D object that we want to manipulate. Otherwise, we can do all kinds of changes here, change scale, rotation, size, even the whole objects, or add our custom scripts that we want to use, or animations or whatever to this objects even later on. So then on the parent object here, so this is the cube object placeable, we do have some further options. So here we can add custom interactions, which we are going to do in a bit. But we also have the option to enable or disable the transform at all. We could enable movement or disable movement, rotation, scale, deletion, or reset. So disable the reset option. So for this example, let's go ahead and disable the rotation actually, so that we just see how it works. And we can even go ahead and we even have further options. This is the selection material. So if we select objects, they're going to have some kind of blue outline, but maybe we don't want that. And some objects, they're really complicated. So maybe the selected material will not work 100% properly. So we can also just deactivate this, and we'll only see, well, the menu popping up over the objects, but we're not going to see this blue outline. So then all the other scripts here are not so interesting for us right now. So it's especially this and this one where we can do some customizations, and of course the custom interactions, which we're going to talk about later. And then there is this corresponding scriptable objects of the placeable object. And this one will let us, well, manipulate, for example, the UI sprite. So we could change the UI sprite here of the objects later on. We could also do that in the prefab and image editor. And we can also trigger here if the object should be hidden in the UI. So for example, if we want this object not to be within the placement bar from the beginning on, but rather we want to be able to pick this up. We can do that by, for example, hiding it in the beginning and then later on triggering whether it should be enabled within the AR placement bar. Same thing with the grayed out. So if you want to show that there's some kind of object, then but the player is not able to place it yet, maybe it needs to be unlocked later on, we can also disable this in the beginning or gray out things later on. Then we can decide whether we want to use inventory amount, so a quantity. So let's say we want to have only 10 objects of something. We could also enable this one and then later on go down with the number. And if the number is at 0, we could, for example, then gray out or hide the object. And here we can also decide whether this individual object should be spawned if we select and click it. If not, this could be used just maybe for switching your ammunition or your weapon type or for spell casting, let's say. So for any kind of use case where you don't actually want to spawn an object. Awesome, but let's go ahead and see how the AR Magic Bar is working now. And for that, let's go and click on the AR Magic Bar, and within the placement bar logic, we can add our databases, so we can create as many as we want. And we can just drag in our cube database here, like this. And before we start, let's make sure to have an event system in our scene so that things are working. And let's replace that with the input system UI module. And before we start, we of course don't want this object to be actually grayed out. So let's enable this one again. And let's go to our game view and hit play. So then let's move around. And then let's click on the icon and place it somewhere. Here we have it. Let's click on the cube. And we'll be able to see our options. We disabled rotation a bit earlier, but we can click on movement, move it around. We can scale it like this, or we could delete it as well. We can hide the AR Magic Bar, or we can open the inventory, which is empty right now, but we could potentially just take our object here, drag it onto the inventory, and then it would create basically this holder here where we can see this is our database here, and we could also go ahead and drag it back into the AR Magic Bar like this and place it again, or place multiple ones and do whatever we want. So this is the simple setup of the AR Magic Bar. Next up, we're going to do something a bit more advanced, which is going to add custom interactions. And for that, we can simply go to our folder here for the custom interactions, do a right click, create AR Magic Bar, and let's create a custom interaction list like this one and call this one color, or maybe change color custom interactions like this. And we can already go ahead and create a first custom interaction, and let's call this one change color to green, for example. And this one, we're also going to call this change color to green. And we're going to then create an icon later on, but we want to use our custom UI prefab. And here we could also just individualize, create a completely customized custom interaction UI prefab. So let's go under the AR Magic Bar under resources, custom interactions, custom interaction UI prefab. And then let's go back to our custom interaction here and drag in the prefab like this. And again, we can double click and potentially change the appearance, so color or just a general look. But this is how the standard prefab looks like right now. So then let's go back to our custom interaction list here and drag in this custom interaction like that. And so then before we do any further scripting, let's first of all create our materials that we want to use. So let's go ahead and create a new material, and let's call this simply green and make this one green. And let's go ahead and click on our cube object here and create on the cube, and let's switch the material here to green. Let's do a little screenshot for our custom interaction like this. And then let's drag this one into our custom interactions and call this one change color to green icon. And the texture type we're going to set to sprite 2D and UI and apply. Make sure also that the sprite mode is single here. And then we can set this one as the icon for our custom interaction like this. And let's go back, and then in our cube object placeable, we can add the list of our change color to change color custom interactions. We can add this one here. We could potentially add this list to all of our placeable objects. So we can create one list to change colors, let's say, and assign this list, which will then work on any object. And now let's simply see what happens by clicking play. So now if we go ahead and place our object, click on it, we will see a selection. So one time we have our simple transform options here, and one time we have our custom interactions. Let's actually reduce the lighting. This makes it quite hard to see. So let's make it 2.2 here. Click on play. So like this, and now we have these two icons here. And this one is our custom interaction. So now we can see, okay, this is not looking too great because we have this screenshot on the background, but again, we could just personalize or individualize this, this template here. And now if we click on it, nothing happens. And this is because we haven't created any kind of logic. So let's go ahead and click on the cube object and disable our transform here for a second. And now if we would go ahead and restart the game, place the object, we would only have our custom interactions here and not even an option to select in between transform and custom interaction. So this would be really great if you have some kind of game where you just want to, well, interact with the objects and characters in a specific way. And we could even go ahead, of course, as we just saw, and deactivate the selected material. So let's say you would have some kind of communication or way to interact with your characters and talk with them, then this might be a good option like this. And so we also don't have this blue material anymore. Okay, so let's add the functionality to our custom interaction. Let's create a new object here, call this one custom interaction logic. And so what we want to do, as stated earlier, is we want to change the color of the cube to green when we click it. So let's create a new script for that. We can create this one in the custom interaction, and let's call this custom interaction turn to green logic like this. And let's double click the script. Alright, so once the script has opened, let's first of all create a new serialized field for our material. So serialized field, material, and let's call this one, let's call this one green material. So then let's also create a new serialized field for our custom interaction, and this is of type custom interaction data SO. Let's call this one the switch to green interaction. And then in our start method, let's go to our custom interaction UI. And then let's subscribe on custom interaction triggered. And this is going to fire off anytime a new custom interaction is triggered from any kind of object. So let's create a method here. And this method, so let's call this method on custom interaction triggered. This one holds a whole lot of information. Let's call this one args. And what we can do is use this information to basically implement the logic that we want. So first of all, let's then go ahead into our arcs that we have, and we do have here the reference to the object. So this is the object that has triggered the custom interaction. And let's see whether this object actually has a mesh renderer attached, because otherwise we of course cannot add the green color. So let's first of all go ahead and also create a new mesh renderer variable here. Let's call this renderer. And of course we also want to then check if our renderer is null. That means that maybe the object doesn't have anything attached, but maybe a children has something attached. And here we also, of course, well, we do not handle objects that have multiple mesh renderers, so more complex objects that have multiple mesh renderers in the children. We're just going to handle very simple objects. So for that, we're just going to say get component in children of type mesh renderer. And so then if our renderer is still null, then we're just gonna return like this, because then, well, there's no mesh renderer attached to the object whatsoever. But if there is, and our custom interaction data is O, so the custom interaction that has been triggered on this specific object is equal to our switch to green interaction. So if it's the interaction that we want to write logic for, then we want to set the shared material on the renderer to the green material, like this. So then let's delete the update method here, and let's go back to our Unity editor. So then back in the editor, let's assign the custom interaction turn to green logic to our game object here. So then let's take the green material that we have created and also the change color to green custom interaction and drag it in here. And then let's see what happens. So let's start the game. Let's look around and then place our object here. And now if we click it, we have the custom interaction. Let's click on this and we can see that the cube color turned to green. Cool, so we just implemented a very easy custom interaction. This tool is super flexible. You can do anything, picking up objects, triggering some kind of level up, having a conversation with a character and starting this conversation with a custom interaction. So it's super flexible, it's super easy to do. And yeah, that's it for a first tutorial, having set up a simple scene within the AR Magic Bar. And in some further tutorials, I'm going to show more complex projects, what you can do with it. So again, the AR Magic Bar is very good for easy prototypes, but then also can be built up on for more complex experiences. All right, but that's it for this tutorial. So if you have any further questions, please write a comment and also find the official AR Magic Bar documentation in the video description. And as always, thanks for watching and see you next time.